Due to the pandemic, we're going to try something a little differently this time, even though we've had over a year to prepare. Anyway, let's start the show.
Hi, my name is Evan, and this is Instruments of Fandom, a show that still exists, despite everything that's been happening. It's actually a pretty specific itch that this web series scratches for me. It's boiled down to its essence. It's an opportunity to talk about a hobby I have and educate people about musical instruments as interpreted through the mediums that they may be more familiar with, like video games and television shows and movies and what have you. A lot of the instruments that we talk about on this show were designed and created and conceived whole cloth by people who probably didn't have a whole lot of tangible musical knowledge. And I think that a big part of art is about how what you've seen and heard and felt is processed and reconstructed. How you change and adapt what you've been through to suit your own purposes. I feel like this is an important thing to consider for this show, which deals with musical instruments that are not themselves designed to be real, tangible objects that one can interact with, but are meant to represent the idea of instruments symbolically. I think it's really important, particularly to keep in mind when discussing today's instrument, the Dragon Dagger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Return to the sea.
Power Rangers actually has a pretty interesting history to trace back. It was sort of an American repackaging of the Japanese Super Sentai series, which was a very specific brand of the Japanese tokusatsu genre. Tokusatsu itself was sort of a response to and adaptation of American superhero comics like Superman and Batman, which themselves are steeped in the trappings of the Greek Herculean monomyth, the Grecian super being, as it were. It's culture adapting culture, adapting culture, adapting culture, often without ever actually realizing that it's doing it.
誰だお前は!地獄からの使者、スパイダーマン。父とガリアの復讐を俺が果たす。
The idea of the imagery of musical instruments as symbolism really kept coming back into my headspace as I began to try to work out the real-world parallel to today's instrument, the Dragon Dagger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So with that in mind, let's take a look and see if we can nail down what it might actually be. Is it a flute? Is it a trumpet? Wouldn't a knife made out of brass be a fairly ineffective weapon? Let's find out.
As an aside, there have been a few different variations of the Dragon Dagger throughout the series. Fat rubber props, curved blade versions, and what have you. There was even a gold version for when the dagger was sealed away to protect it from the forces of evil. Apparently, this gold version was sold as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive in 2014, and it even appeared in a few Kamen Rider episodes. The different versions don't change the layout of the blade significantly, so for this episode, we're going to default to the iconic original dagger version that Tommy Oliver always kept close by. Lean, clean, and evergreen. Now to begin, let's break down what we're looking at. When you strip away all the adornment, the ornamentation, and the festooning, what we're working with here are a couple of fairly basic musical appliances. For starters, we've got 3 brass valves. We also see what looks to be 5 unkeyed holes on the other side here. And last but not least, we have the mouthpiece. It's a fairly standard square windway, not unlike what might be found on our fallen comrade in musical education, your broken first grade recorder. We miss you, Toots. You were too pure for this world. You may notice a distinct lack of a fipple, though. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. First up, I want to talk about those holes on the right-hand side there. They're arranged like the holes you'd find on a tin whistle or an ocarina. Now, we're going to stick closer to the ocarina side of this because this blade doesn't look like it has an opening on the end, so it should function more like an awk than a typical flute or tin whistle or recorder, vibrating as one whole enclosed chamber, or Helmholtz resonator, as they're known. Or rather it would, were it not for the fact that old Greenie here, he never touches them. Yeah. Doesn't even put his hand on this side. Oh well. Let's move over to the brass valves. Valves are pretty common amongst brass instruments, and how they work is a pretty nifty feat of engineering. You know how trombone players will stretch the instrument back and forth to change the pitch of the note? Well, brass valves work by connecting and disconnecting the different tubes of, say, a trumpet. Sort of like a train switching tracks mid-trip. The longer the tube, the deeper the note, and vice versa. The musician's embouchure and the pressure of their breath also affect the note. And in combination, all of these elements tend to give most brass instruments a pretty impressive range. Even those musicians who like to cover the front of their face with a pair of plastic, silver, seductively kissable lips. A musical interlude from me? Oh, Green Ranger, you shouldn't have. If you could pry yourself away from those silver bad boys long enough, you might spy another problem. The mouthpiece. Now, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I had a brief stint where I played the tuba. It was loud, cumbersome, and it allowed me to annoy my sister in ways I had only previously dreamed were possible. Just on a personal note, I'd like to say that tuba players are the con artists of the musical world. The tuba only plays one note. It's called Q, and it does not exist in any musical scale. The reason I bring this up is because one of the things I had to always make sure I had with me for band class was a mouthpiece. The tuba's mouthpiece is funnel-shaped, and it looked like this. This thing is probably still kicking around somewhere in my dad's attic. A lot of brass instruments have these funnel-shaped mouthpieces, like the French horn. My sister played that dumb-looking frisbee. And also the trumpet. That was my brother's instrument. The trumpet's mouthpiece looks like this as well, just like the other two. The Dragon Dagger's mouthpiece, however, is a square windway. And as I stated earlier, it matches more of the mouthpiece of a recorder or an ocarina or a penny whistle. I mention this because the MIDI tone used for the Dragon Dagger in the show is meant to emulate the sound of a trumpet. Heralding the Dragon Zord from beyond the 9th dimension! But this mouthpiece, it ain't producing that kind of sound. If they wanted it to sound more accurate, it would need to sound something like this. So why instead this sound? Well, that actually ties into our conclusion, which is... the Dragon Dagger is an EWI. Computer, pop that bad boy up! That's the classic EWI from Yamaha, one of many such electronic wind instruments. Here's another in the Eigenharp. 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 It's a hard word to say. Here it is spelled out. How do you pronounce this? Computer, how do you pronounce this?
Eigenharp.
Doesn't sound right. There's also the eCorder, a MIDI-capable digital instrument designed for recorder players.
Sarah Jeffery of Team Recorder does a great video about the eCorder. You should check out her video at the link in the description. Thanks, Sarah, for letting me talk about you with a mouthful of rice. I appreciate it.
The point being, the term electronic wind instrument can describe any MIDI-capable or self-contained controller designed to translate breath and pressure into digital signal and interpret that as noise. They don't require a resonating chamber to form their sound, and because of this, they can come in basically any shape desired, like a pizza pie, or a hairdryer, or the Communist Manifesto, or perhaps even a knife.
That's right. This blade, housing circuit boards. These valves, input buttons. These holes, they probably don't do anything. He doesn't put his hand on this side. But this mouthpiece contains a sensor that translates the Green Ranger's breath into a digital signal, thus allowing the sound of purely theoretical electronic trumpets to announce that some giant monster is about to have its fucking afternoon canceled. Make it official, Saban! You cowards! So it turns out Saban doesn't own Power Rangers. Saban doesn't exist anymore. It's now owned by Bandai. So don't copyright strike me, you cowards. Please don't copyright strike me. Spider-Man. キラリと光る光の目 Spider-Man. 安らぎ捨ててすべてを捨てて悪を追って空かける Change the apart. 君はなぜ戦い続けるのか命をかけて一筋に無敵の男スパイダーマン By the way, St. Louis Ocarinas, I'd like to formally request that you take another pass at your Dragon Dagger Ocarina. It's well made, and it sounds clear and crisp, but it only has 5 holes, and it can't even play a full octave. There are basically no songs that you can play on this. I don't like it.